welcome back. Let's now talk about employment, employability, but the big one has to do with the national minimum wage. The federal government has set that target of 70,000 naira. Some states who have big capacity, or maybe they want to treat their workers better, put some at 75, some are putting it at 80, 85. We're seeing some states now doing over 100,000 naira. But what's the level of compliance across board, and how does it affect the public and the private sector? We've been joined in the program by the Director General of the Nigerian Employment Consultative Association. Employers Association.
Employers Consultative.
Consultative Association. That's Mr. Adewale Smatoyende. Thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you. Always a pleasure being here.
Yeah, it's good to see you in different attire this time. I know that particular NECA outfit you always wear.
I beat you to it this way.
Okay, so let's begin with just an overview of your impression of the new moves. You know, there was an era where it was almost every other battle, every other day about payment. Maybe that has tapered a bit. Now we're looking at record increases at a subnational level, but we're also looking at each level of compliance. In fact, one of the things we were querying, as much as we're excited about the numbers, is sustainability. But what's your impression?
Thank you once again. I think it's a good signal. You know, the last 3 negotiations that we've had in the context of the national minimum wage, the challenge had always been the subnationals. You know, when the federal government can muzzle the amount negotiated, while the private sector can do within its context of its limitation, also pay a bit above what the government was doing then. The conversation has always centered around the subnationals, their inability to pay. And that has always been the crisis. And even when we talk about the compliance issues, there has always been compliance concerns at the subnational level. But now that we are hearing the news after the president signed the 70,000, some states are upping it above 70,000, which is good for us. But there are more fundamental issues that we need to look at beyond just upping the minimum wage from 70 to 100 to 140,000. And all of those 104,000 Imo State. Now the key issue we need to interrogate is this: why that increase? Is it because of increased productivity at the side of the workers? Is it in the context of prudent management of resources and maximization of the natural resources that the state has so it can generate more income? Or is it a direct factor of the president's magnanimity by increasing the allocation to the federation account? So if the
it's not a magnanimity, it's the federation money.
Well, federation money, yeah. But he probably couldn't have. He could have said, "Look, I want to put those funds somewhere."
No, he doesn't have the right to. That's for the record. He doesn't have the right. If it's a law, it's a law.
Now the flow to the state has increased proportionately, and it's expected that you respond also to the needs of the critical stakeholders in that state proportionately, and the workers happen to be one of those key stakeholders. So it's a good development within the context of the socio-economic situation that we currently face. So we welcome that move, and we also urge, and that was what prompted our urge that other states whose inflow also have increased proportionately should do more within the context of not only increase the minimum wage for the state workers, but address key fundamental issues. Because if you don't address those issues, pay 200,000, it comes back to buying nothing. It's about what exactly that amount can buy. And if you can deal with 3 different issues: issue of transportation, which is very at the heart of workers, because all household must transport, must eat, and must get accommodation. So deal with those 3 issues with the support as an increase in the minimum wage, and then things will start building up. But it's a good start that the minimum wage in those states are increased.
So what's your interpretation of, you have pointed some intent for the increase?
Yeah.
Productivity, prudent management of resources, And I don't know whether I added the last layer, just politics or whatever. Because some of them are looking for second term. So this is a good political game for them. So we can't take that off the table as well. And then increase in revenue from what has happened so far under this administration. So what, in your view, is the biggest driver here? Have you been able to interpret the intent?
I think the biggest drive for us will be increase in revenue. Your options are, your reasons for not paying is almost tending to zero, because the initial conversation about not paying is inability to pay because of the inflow from the federation account to the states. I remember there was a point where there was serious conversation about changing the distribution model, the percentages that goes to the states, to the local government, to the federal government, so that the states can be in a better position to meet their responsibilities as per paying the minimum wage. But now that the inflow from federation account has doubled, in some instances tripled, that argument naturally just reduces. So we think it's a response to the inflow, the new inflow from federation account to the states, which we believe strongly the state can also maximize to deal with other socio-economic issues that will make the minimum wage actually sustainable for the workers. Come to think of it, Carrie, it's the minimum. I think we should. It is the minimum that nobody should earn. It's not the final. It's not the topmost in the edge of wages. It's just the base.
That's the lowest level.
The lowest level worker that you should know, and that is basically what we're talking about.
And it's a very important point to make, because we've had announcements time and again. In fact, you have announcements that were made decades ago, and they'll come and tell you that, no, it was just announcements. I'm talking beneficiaries. We never got anything afterwards. So we spoke with the state government, who said, when will they start receiving? That's for Imo State. And it said, well, by the end of September, this month, they're meant to start receiving it. And we'll be following up, to be sure, because just in February, you were still saying that there are some states that are not paying. They should start paying. NLC even named some states that are not paying. So it's very interesting that we're here now. The Imo State government said that, well, their IGR increased from, 400 million naira to about 3 billion naira. And then what they get from Federation account increased from about 5.7 billion to 14 billion. So it has doubled. So obviously that's where the money will be coming from. But you have raised concerns, because it's meant to stand on 3 legs. There's meant to be productivity. Absolutely. In the state. There's also meant to be the use of resources, how you're able to convert prudent use, be able to convert that to revenue, before we then talk about the federation account, what comes from the federal.
Exactly.
So first of all, the other states that have not announced an increase, a further increase, do they have any excuse for you? Do they have any excuse not to increase it beyond? Lagos is paying 85, for example, beyond the 70. Some other states are still struggling to pay 70. NLC said some states only added 5,000 naira to the previous one. So does any state right now have any excuse not to pay more than the minimum wage?
Well, why we are not directly involved in the core, the real dynamics of the state, what are the socioeconomic challenges that they have. But it is important to also state that the workers, either in the public and private sector, they are very key drivers of the economy of any state, and a very key driver of even the private sector. And whatever will improve productivity, will increase motivation, especially within the context of the reforms that we are currently ongoing. Whatever will reduce their pain so that they can focus on the issue of productivity. If you are hungry, or if you are not really composed, you are hungry, you have issues with shelter, you have issues with transport, hardly will be productive at work. So it's in the best interest of those state governments that they see the civil service as the engine that drives that system. So if you see it from that perspective, you realize then it becomes important for you to address the issues that concerns that engine. And that's the perception of the private sector, because the workers in the private sector, they are quite critical to productivity, critical to growth of the private sector, and that is the perception we have, that workers are important. Then let's treat them, as the ILO said, that workers are not, they are not commodity, employees are not commodity. So treat them in such a way that they can focus within the context of productivity. We cannot take away motivation and compensation from productivity. I think the goal, there must be a nexus between both of them so that we can achieve the balance that we want. So no state really have no excuse in the context of the current realities to stay at that 70,000, especially with people struggling with the price of petrol is still up. While many states are still doing a lot with the CNG buses, we think more still needs to be done. A lot still needs to be done with the context of food security and shelter. You know, once you deal with that, the conversation will not really be about minimum wage, because the 70 naira, the 70,000, the quantum of that 70,000, we're able to buy enough for an average household, so that it's not about the quantum, it's about what exactly the 70,000 can buy.
Very important point you make. Now, we know that government is the largest employer in Nigeria.
Absolutely.
But that's not to say the private sector is not pulling its own weight as well. I don't know if you've been able to do
that. That is also contestable. You know, for every 10 jobs created, it has been established globally, every 10 jobs created, the private sector creates 8 of them.
Which one are you contesting? That in Nigeria, that the government is the biggest employer?
No, I don't agree.
You don't agree with that?
Except you back it up with very...
So what is your own?
I think the private sector remains the biggest employer.
The biggest employer.
Yeah, the biggest employer. If we maximize, you know, in the last 10 years, we have enumerated the numbers of businesses that have either left the shore of this country or closed shop. Let me give you a simple hypothesis. Take a manufacturing business that employs 50,000 because of the production system they use. You employ 50,000. Now, in the value chain, in the production chain, there are businesses that supplies that manufacturing business. And there are businesses that also they are off-takers of the production of that manufacturing business. So at the back, there are businesses supplying that manufacturing company. At the front end, there are businesses off-taking from that manufacturing business. Now, if that 50,000, if that business should close shop, that means 50,000 people are going home. We see that 50,000 people going home. But we lose sight of the many businesses that will be unable to supply. And because they are unable to supply that business inputs, they are also closing. And other businesses at the front end, they are waiting for this business to produce so that they can also sell. Also, they will also go home, and all the workers. So, hypothetically, you have from 50,000 that are going home from the principal primary employer. You have another 100 or 150,000 going home that we cannot account for. So in that context, you see the private sector as the biggest employer, basically, in the context of Nigeria.
Well, I don't expect anything less. You naturally speak for the private sector, but I'm talking about the aggregation of federal, states, and all of them. But again, that's the challenge with data in Nigeria.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they will tell you that we're the largest employer
in fact,
in Nigeria.
I'm looking at, depending when we get MBS's data.
Yeah. Absolutely.
ChatGPT says government at all levels is between 10 to 12%. Private formal sector is between 15 to 20%. And then the private informal, which is talking about those back and forth, accounts for even more than that.
Fair enough.
So thanks to ChatGPT.
No, we're not going to take that. So that is very contestable. But it speaks to lack of data again. We can talk about structured employment or structured employment. I think when we break it down, we can then go granular. Yeah. But the point I was even trying to make is this. For the private sector now, Labour has been saying we need to renegotiate minimum wage. I know how much headache you had coming to this point of 70,000 naira. So is the private sector also ready to give more? And this is not coming from a place of magnanimity, right? This is coming from a place of what needs to be done to ensure that the economy is running. So is the private sector also able to stay at the renegotiating table and say, okay, we're able to do more than we're doing right now?
Let me give a bit of the dynamics of the private sector, how it works in the private sector. And this is very, very, very important. Now, at the private sector, we have sectoral groups. We have the food and beverages sector, we have the chemical and non-metallic sector, we have the shop and distributive. Over 35 different sectors that we have, over 35. And at that sectoral level, there are engagements between the employers in that sector and the unions in that sector. So every 2 years or 3 years, and in some instances every year, there's a negotiation of the minimum wage in that sector. So before we came to the 3 years minimum wage now, when it was 5 years, the private sector will have negotiated the minimum wage in that sector twice before the 5 years. So progressively, the minimum wage in the private sector has always been ahead of the national minimum wage. So even when we got to the negotiation last year, and we are discussing the minimum wage itself, and we arrived at the 65,000, it was based on the fact that the lowest, probably the lowest paying employer in the private sector is probably paying around 60,000 when it was 30,000. So
including contract staff and the rest?
Now, there are different dynamics within the context of the contract staff. Because when it was 30,000, yes, people were playing around that 30,000, but immediately it became 70,000 and it became the law. Our responsible advice to all employers is that you must abide by the law. It's 70,000. The socio-economic conditions that workers are facing, that households are facing, also make it imperative that you pay 70,000. Because if 30,000 cannot bring the employer, the worker, to work, basic transportation, then it doesn't, it's become callous for you to insist on paying 30,000. So employers in the private sector are paying currently above the 70,000. Will renegotiation take place? It will be handled at the sectoral level, where we know the compassion level of employers at the private sector at the sectoral level can hardly be compared with what is happening at the state or the federal level. Also, it's also important to note that immediately the fuel subsidy was removed, and remember the president also alluded to it, that the private sector rose up to the occasion. Currently, a lot of our employees, many are working from home, whether 1 day or 2 days working from home, so that to reduce the pressure on transportation. Some are working full day from home. We know of organizations that are giving products, part of their products, giving staff every month. And these are part of, these are benefits in kind that you can't really quantify, just to mitigate the challenges of the employees. So the private sector, basically, we are doing as much as we can do within the context of our limitation. We don't draw revenue. We are not part of the sharing formula at the federation account. We don't collect tax. Tax is collected for the private sector. We don't receive contributions. Private sector pay contributions. And even within the context of the IGR that you mentioned, part of our fears is this, and we hope the state government will be mindful of this. You know, when a state government says they've increased the IGR, I think we need to interrogate it. What exactly does it mean? Is it that we have increased taxes? Is it that we have created a lot of further bottlenecks for the informal sector or the private sector so that it can generate more income? Even while the federal government is working assiduously through the Presidential Committee on Fiscal and Tax Reforms to reduce and consolidate all tax to 1 digit. So we need to interrogate those contexts of revenue, those contexts of IGR. Where exactly is those IGR, where are they coming from? And I must say this also. While the revenue increases from the federation account, beyond the context of the minimum wage that we're talking about, I think it's also important for the states to pay attention to human capital development at their states. Because you build infrastructure, at a point infrastructures will decay. If you don't train the workers, if you don't improve the capacity of those workers, then you are basically sabotaging yourself. You know, we were at Nasarawa State last week, and we saw what was happening in the context of human capital development. It was amazing. Just in North Central now, it was amazing. And our expectation is that beyond just pulling the funds and increasing minimum wage, which is very necessary, a lot still needs to be done to equip the workers, as been done in the private sector, at the subnational level, so that context of productivity will meet the context of wage demand, so that the kind of growth that we desire, we can achieve it quickly.
How do we build that cultural problem? Because you have segued somehow into a political conversation because of what we see as perception of what you call performance by governors. That's why I see most of them are big on things we can see. If it's not things you can see, some of them are not really big on it. But this is fundamental, which is the reason why America is confused over China, because China took its time to build capacity. I think I was listening to the CEO of Apple, and he was talking about the size, the incredible size of scalability at scale. So he was speaking at a forum. I don't know how big the hall was. If you want to do this particular thing now, that in America, you may not have people that can do that in this field, the hall where it was. But he said, in China, you can have people that are technically astute, that can fill stadia. That was his description. Because they were talking about cheap labor and all. He said, no, that's not true exactly.
Absolutely.
I don't know what.
I agree with you.
So how do we help the public officials who are looking at their performance based on, the things we can see, rather than building capital, human capital development? Because this also will increase the wage size. And it also shows in the disproportionate way they pay. So, for instance, if I heard a professor in Nigeria earns less than 600,000, how much is that? Is that our money for all the work they do? And then we have the issue of aides of governors earning 1 million. You see that disparity? What do you make of it?
I think beyond the advocacy from stakeholders, I think the press also have to start interrogating certain issues. I think our value system should start changing gradually. I think we place more attention to the physical. We've seen cameras blaring on a local government chairman commissioning a borehole. I think our focus should change and interrogating what exactly matters to us in 10 years' time as a nation. And those things that matter to us should be the capacity of our people. If you don't train them, then build the best of infrastructure. The people you don't train will run down those infrastructures. And that's why we are aligned with the whole context and gamut of skill development. And our foray also into skill development, it just opened there for all to see. Recently we got an opportunity from Microsoft, an international organization of employers. They are giving us over 100,000 opportunity to train Nigerians influencing AI free of charge. And we've deployed that opportunity to Nigerians. We've informed agencies, we've informed employers. All they have to do is just log on to that platform, complete the 6 module, fluency in AI, and print their certificates. It's Microsoft-backed certificates. Print it and give them that introductory level, introductory entrance into the whole context of AI. If you're not literate in AI, or if you don't know the basics, then your claim to be a productive employee will be in contention in the next few years. So I think the press should start interrogating the things that really matter. And human capital development is one of those.
Well, thank you so much. It's an ongoing conversation, apparently.
Absolutely.
And let's see how this culture can change.
Absolutely.
And now there's more money, especially the elements you talked about, transportation, feeding, and housing.
And housing, yeah.
Nigeria Employers Consultative Association Director General Adewale Smart-Oyerinde joined us. Thank you, sir, for coming.
Thank you always for having us.
All right.
Thank you.
We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking to MTN. We'll tell you why they are here in just a moment. Stay with us.